Joining me right now is former federal prosecutor and Fox News contributor Andy McCarthy. Andy, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much for being here.
Morning,
your
Maria.
reaction to what we see happening, where do you think John Durham's probe goes next?
Well, I'm glad you played that bit from Cash at the end right before I came on, because I think in terms of the narrative, he's right. But it's an extravagant extrapolation of what Durham's done here, because even though I agree that everybody is running from the hills or for the hills away from this dossier, which was complete nonsense and should have been seen as complete nonsense just on its face when we first learned about it. But for the moment, the only thing Durham's charged anyone with is lying to the FBI, and not even lying about the dossier. So far, the charges he's brought are against people for lying about either who they were working for or who their sources of information were. So it's very modest, because the dossier could be complete nonsense or it could be completely true, and it wouldn't affect Durham's cases one way or the other.
You know, it's interesting. You say we should have known that the dossier was garbage. I mean, I said that from the beginning, and I said that I can't see this being true at all, just from my interviews with people like Devin Nunes and John Ratcliffe over and over again between 2017, 18, and 19, and I got trashed. The media was, on this hell-bent idea that Trump colluded, no matter how much I pushed back. So it wasn't so obvious to most people, Andy. And, you're talking about what these three indictments mean. What about the fact that Kevin Kleinsmith was also arrested, a junior lawyer at the FBI, because he doctored documents to try to say that Carter Page was not an asset of the CIA? Does that open up a Pandora's box to the FBI? Because, Andy, remember, we know that we have now the declassified John Brennan notes that showed that Hillary Clinton was cooking up a story to tie Donald Trump to Russia. And John Brennan briefed President Obama. He briefed Joe Biden. All these people knew what Hillary was doing.
Yeah. Well, Maria, first, I feel your pain, because I wrote a book about this years ago and wrote a number of columns about it at the time, saying that you wouldn't even have to know what the sources were of the Steele dossier to read it and know that it was nonsense, and wonder how in the world trained investigators could have taken any actions on account of it. And I'd also point out that Steele briefed people at the State Department, and there was a woman at the State Department who got his briefing, and within about a few minutes, she was able to figure out that one of the key parts of it had to be wrong. So if anybody had seriously looked at this, it would have been clear that it was nonsense, which goes to show how abusive this was by the FBI, because they clearly didn't do their normal investigative practice. But all that said, what was Kleinsmith charged with? He was charged with lying, but not lying to the court. He was charged with lying to another FBI agent. And the last two indictments that Durham has brought have both been about lying to the FBI. So Durham's position appears to be, from these indictments, that the FBI, at least the agents who were handling the case, were duped. And I think that's a very, that's going to be a very difficult thing for him to convince people about. But, if you were thinking that he was going to have some grand overarching indictment that was going to bring in government officials who were involved in this, I don't think he'd be taking the position that people lied to the FBI and fooled them before they went to the FISA court.
Yeah, maybe. But, Andy, what about the January 25, 26, 27 meeting in 2017 where Danchenko admitted to the FBI, I made it up. We were having beers among friends and we embellished. Yeah, the Steele dossier was made up. Danchenko told the FBI that on January 26, 2017. And what did the FBI do next? They renewed the wiretaps on Carter Page. So even though they were told it was all made up, they still continued to wiretap Carter Page. Is there no culpability for that?
Look, Maria, I think it's worse than that. I mean, as bad as what you've just described, when they talked to Danchenko, they were already getting their second warrant. So he's the main guy. He's the main source of information that you would want to talk to in the investigation. And they don't talk to him until 4 months after they're in the FISA court getting a warrant under oath. So it's even more, if it's possible, it's even more abusive than what you've described. And I think there should be culpability, and I imagine that Durham's going to write a narrative report that's going to say that the Hillary Clinton campaign was the source of the dossier, that they fabricated it, that they peddled it. But when they brought it to the FBI, they were pushing on an open door, and it doesn't look to me like Durham is setting the stage to bring criminal charges about that, even though he may fry them in a narrative report.
We'll see. I think this next 6 months is critical because, you know, he does not want to get anywhere near the 2022 elections, right? So if he's going to come down with some big fish indictments, they should happen sooner rather than later so that he is not politically oriented by the midterms. We'll see. Andy, great work on your part. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Maria.